Hey kids, today we're going to be looking at the structure of an argument. Now remember, the purpose of an argument is to convince your audience that they need to change their beliefs, change their feelings about an issue, take a course of action, or perhaps just consider something or a position that they had never considered before. Now, most arguments contain these 5 elements. They do not need to be in the specific order I am going to talk about here today, but it is something that needs to be part of any argumentative piece that you submit. So let's go ahead and take a look at the first one here, and that is going to be the hook, because the hook grabs the reader's attention. Sometimes you just need to get your audience's attention. There's a lot of ways to do this. It often establishes a connection between the reader and the writer and provides background information. Some ways we can do this is an anecdote, an image, a definition, or a quotation. Remember, an anecdote is a short story that conveys a point and perhaps leads into what is the second part of an argument, the claim. Now, the claim, sometimes English teachers also refer to this as the thesis statement or the controlling idea, but it usually comes in the opening section of the paper, and it states the writer's belief in what he or she wishes to argue. And it can be really straightforward and clear. For example, I believe that, though generally more successful papers do not use all those helping verbs like I believe or I think. It just comes out and says, here's the position, okay? But the position generally needs to be something that previews what the rest of the paper is going to be about. It kind of controls the scope of what you're talking about as well. So, for example, if you're arguing that dogs are superior pets to cats, you may only talk about 3 major points in the claim that you're going to cover in the paper. For example, dogs are superior crime fighters, dogs are more hypoallergenic than cats, and dogs display more loyalty as pets. Okay, so that kind of limits the number of things you're going to be arguing. And also a claim, the third thing, it must be provocative. A reasonable person should be able to disagree with the statement. Okay, simply stating that dogs are superior pets to cats is kind of provocative, because obviously there's cat lovers out there and they are going to disagree with that statement. And we can get into lots of other issues which can be more controversial, but you get the idea. It cannot be a statement of fact, and the claim certainly cannot be a question. Usually, though, if you find yourself tempted to ask a question, if you write out the answer, that may potentially turn into a claim. But it's just something to think about when you put forth a claim. It needs to be provocative. It needs to kind of control the scope of what you're going to talk about, and it also needs to preview what the rest of the essay is going to be about. Support. Support is the reasoning behind the argument, and you as the author are going to provide supporting evidence for your claim in the form of data, quotes, anecdotes, and so on. And usually the most reliable support is going to be support based on evidence and data and logical reasoning. Less convincing support could be based on, say, an appeal to your personal prestige as an expert, or even citing other expert testimonies, and usually the least reliable ends up being an appeal to emotion, what we call pathos. Appeals to emotion, while they can tug at the heartstrings, if you really examine them, oftentimes they're kind of fallacious and they don't really stand up to examination. So once again, my earlier example of dogs being superior pets to cats, I could relate to you a personal story that's very moving of how a tree fell on me and my pet dachshund Fritz ran for help to the firemen and they got me and saved me before I died. But in light of the fact that while that is a moving story and a wonderful one-time incident, it's going to fall apart in the face of a counter-argument that has real data. And it talks about how, dogs, maybe cats are better pets for the following reasons, okay? So be aware that the best support usually blends together logical and emotional appeals. You just can't have emotional. And that brings us to concessions and refutations. With a concession, the writer recognizes that the arguments are being made by the other side, and it really does build your credibility as a writer to concede that there may be some points on the other side. It shows that you can discuss the other side and be objective. You're going to be fair and say, okay, this is what some other people might say in response to what I'm saying. But a concession grants that the other side, while it has validity, should be followed by a refutation that argues at length against the opposing viewpoint by providing that your side has more validity, it's more truthful, it has a greater amount and more quality evidence stacked up in your favor. Okay? Simply conceding the other side a point without successfully addressing it is a mistake I see a lot of people make in their essays and their speeches, because then you're just giving away the other side a free point. Okay? If you're going to bring up the other side, and you should, you need to effectively address it. Now, the final part of an argument is a call to action. A call to action draws the writer's argument to a close, restates the claim, and makes a final appeal to values. It's that final plea, it's the final impression, and this would be a time, if you want to inject some emotion into it, this is a great time to do it. And it's very important that a call for action does not merely repeat information, but it sums up the argument quickly and succinctly, gives a few final facts, perhaps a final emotional appeal, perhaps a final appeal to ethos or logic, or it can take many forms, and there's many fine ways to conclude an argument. But generally, the call to action is the shortest part of the paper. Okay, very quickly, you want to tell your reader or your audience what you want them to think, what you want them to do, or what you want them to consider in the light of everything you've put forth in terms of your claims and support. And those are the 5 elements of argumentation. So, I hope you got something out of that, and I will see you next time.